Hello and welcome to another playthrough series from me, Rough Swordsman, Wargamer. This time it's Mark Miklos and GMT's Tri-Pack, Battles of the American Revolution, Guilford, Saratoga and Brandywine. But I'll be playing a battle that's not mentioned here on the lid. Eutaw Springs. Eutaw Springs is ideal as a playthrough because I'm still sharpening up the rules and it's the smallest of the battles. I do make minor misplays, but that's me. But I do catch most of them on the videos. The battle took place on September the 8th, 1781 and was the last great battle in the Deep South. The British, feeling that they were secure, sent out a foraging party to dig for sweet potatoes. But then the Americans came. So, to see what happened to the foraging party and how the ensuing battle went, let's go back nearly 240 years to Eutaw Springs. Before we start playing the game, I just want to go over what actually happens with this series of battles. As you saw in the unboxing, we have the series rulebook, and these will apply to all the battles in this series, Great Battles of the American Revolution. Remember, we've got 3 or 4 battles in our tri-pack, and the rules are very well written. There aren't many of them. It goes up to page 14 because the last couple of pages are sort of charts and the expanded sequence of play, which we'll use all the time regardless of what battle we are playing. We're playing Eutaw Springs because I think this is the easiest one to get to grips with for us new players. So what we do, we get comfortable with the series rulebook, and then we apply those to whichever battle we are playing, plus the exclusive rules for the battle itself. In this case, as I say, Eutaw Springs. But fear not, because there is only a couple of pages of exclusive rules. There we are. And you apply those to this battle. Now, there's a couple of ways to play this game. I would suggest and recommend you starting off, if you've not played this sort of game before, the historical scenario, which is a sort of shortened version of the full one. You come in sort of halfway through, and it gives you a good chance to sort of push some counters about and get to grips with all the rules. But we're playing the full scenario, if you like. And there is no setup because, as you'll see in a minute when we have a look at the counters, all the setup hexes and things are actually printed on the counters themselves. So, without further ado, let's have a quick look at some of the counters. Here's some examples of the American units. First one, Maryland Brigade, you can see is a single colour of blue, and that tells us it's a continental unit or regular unit of the American Army. And there's a horse example as well. Next door, with a dark blue stripe across the top, are the state troops, and again we've got infantry and horse. The ones with the light blue stripe are militia, and these are also denoted by a kneeling chappie here. And there are a couple of sort of specialist units, if you like, first of which is the rifle units, and they do have this big R in the middle. There are 2 types, one with a black circle and one with a white circle, and that tells you whether or not there's going to be any adjustments in close combat, but we'll go through that when we get to it. The other sort of specialist unit is the artillery, and next door to that is a leader, the sort of commanders, in this case Nathaniel Green. One last type of unit is the partisans, and they have this green stripe across the top. And in this battle we have Swamp Fox for the Americans. He has some special abilities, one of which is that he can actually cross swamps that are prohibited to all other units. He's also classed as a demi-leader, which means he has certain abilities when certain conditions are met, mainly in the case of Swamp Fox, for these tactics, which we'll talk about in a moment. So, what do all these numbers mean? Well, in the sort of top left here, you can see a number and a letter. The number is the turn it comes in, and the letter is its entry hex. All the American units come in as reinforcements, if you like, from the turn track. Next is the unit's morale. The higher the number, the better the morale, and that's used for a few things during the game. The bottom two numbers, the first one is its strength points, or SP. And 1 SP is roughly equivalent to 100 men. And this number here is its movement allowance. And that depends, of course, on the terrain. For artillery, the SP is roughly equivalent, 1 SP is roughly equivalent to 2 cannons. So that gives you some idea of the size of the units you're dealing with. The leaders have a series of 3 numbers here, the first of which is a combat DRM, a dice roll modifier. This is added to the combat die and gives that player an advantage. The middle number is a sort of rally DRM, if you like. During the course of the battle, some units may get disrupted or shattered, and if there's a leader on the stack, you can use this to help rally the units. And the last one is its movement value. So that's the American units. Let's have a quick look at some of the British units. Here's some of the British units. As you can see, first one is the Grenadiers. Now the Grenadiers have a red stripe across them, and that tells us that they are regular, British regular army. The ones with the yellow stripes are loyalists, and the ones with brown are militia. And this time you can tell the militia from the other types of unit because they're standing to attention. Now this isn't mentioned in the rule book. I think it was omitted when they updated it. So kneeling for the Americans and standing to attention for the British to denote militia. The British also have rifle units and artillery. And here's an example of a leader, Marchbanks. Same sort of thing with the name, but this time they have a number, and this is a hex number, and this is where they start the battle. So they're actually placed on the map at the start of the game, and that tells you which hex to put it in. Then there's this, the foraging party. These poor souls are sort of cannon fodder, and depending what happens to them depends who gets initiative and who gets surprise and all that sort of thing. So we'll tell you all about that when we set the game up. So that's the British units. Let's now have a look at some of the markers that we'll use in the game. Well, I just wanted to point out before we move on to the markers that some combat results say a step loss or a 2-step loss. Some units have a reduced state on the other side. That is a step loss. If it's a 2-step loss, it will lose it once and then twice, and it's eliminated. However, Some units don't have anything on them, and even a one-step loss will eliminate them. Here's a goodly selection of the markers, the first of which is the disrupted marker. During combat, one result may be that one unit gets disrupted. So you plop one of these on, and that unit has to retreat immediately 3 hexes. And then if it gets disrupted again, it gets shattered. Now, disrupted units can only do a certain amount of things, and a shattered unit even less. So during the rally phase of the turn, this is when we try and get rid of these from the units that have been affected. Pin marker. Again, one of the results of combat may be that units are pinned. Now, this can be a little bit sort of confusing, because normally pin, when a unit is pinned in other war games, it means it's keeping its head down. But in this game, it means it's actually pinned to the combat, to the exchange. Can't retreat, can't move away, has to stay there and go for combat again next turn. Cavalry withdrawal. This is a little bit cheeky. A cavalry unit, because it can move faster, can approach and swoop in and attack a unit, and if lucky, cause damage. And then when the opposing side has its combat and goes to attack the cavalry can say, no, I'm doing a cavalry withdrawal. And that means it can then, without the opposing side causing any hits on it, it can withdraw 3 hexes. So it's like a hit and run thing, which can be fun to do. These are first fire counters, and they go on top of the rifle units I showed you earlier. And the first time they fire their rifles during the rifle fire phase, they can add a +1 to their die roll. They get a +1 dice roll modifier, so that helps them to get a hit for the first time, after which they're discarded. These are momentum counters, and these have a couple of uses, one of which is that you can cash 1 in before you roll for your initiative, that is to see which player goes first, and if you do that you get a +2 to your die roll. You can also, if you've got lots of them, cash in 3, and that gives you the initiative for the turn. They're also used if one side throws a massively high number and they're going to exterminate your units. You can cash one of those in and go, oi, no, roll it again. And they have to roll that die again. But it also works the other way. If you have a bad roll and you want to, you can cash one of these in and re-roll your die roll. Rally on Me are just sort of reminders that if you've got a stack of units, 1 or 2 of which may be disrupted, you put this on the top and that reminds you that you have some disrupted units to try and take care of during that part of the turn. And Disordered, this is where if some of the Americans go bonkers in the English encampment, they get drunk and they get a bit leery, they get disadvantaged and they get disordered. So if that happens, you'll see what we do with those. Right, that's the counters. Let's get the map out. Right, I've got the map set up. They are lovely maps, aren't they? Anyway, you can see I've got it under plexiglass, and some of you may be saying, what the heck's it got under plexiglass for? It's mounted. Well, because of combat, I can actually write on here the sort of results as we go along to show you how combat's resolved with a dry wipe pen, and that might help some of you to understand what's going on. Now, in this battle, we've got the Brits up here encamped, and there's a sort of headquarters, if you like, there. And the Americans are going to be coming on here. And what tends to happen when I play this game, I may be playing it wrong. Remember, I'm not the world's greatest tactician. I'm playing this. This is great fun to play. Trundle up the road, and most of the battling will take place in this sort of area. So once we get going, I can sort of set the camera up and leave it as is, hopefully, just to concentrate on the battle itself. Here we've got the Santee Swamp up the top there. Remember, the only chap is that can cross that is the old what's his name, Swamp Fox. Bit of forestry which will hinder sort of horse units, light forest, and that's about it really. There isn't much slopes. The only bit of slope is up here. Anyway, let's have a look and see, how do you win this thing? The Americans win a decisive victory if at the end of any turn they control this hex here with the star in it without any British zones of control around it, and capture or eliminate 14 SPs worth of non-artillery British and or provincial combat units, excluding militia. And a minimum of 8 of these SPs must be British regulars, the ones with the red stripe across. The British can win a decisive victory the moment they capture or eliminate Nat there, Nathaniel Green, and 12 SPs of non-artillery American combat units, again excluding militia. Militia weren't thought of very highly. And a minimum of 8 of these SPs must be Continentals. Either side can win a substantial victory if the opposing side's morale reaches 0, and we'll have a look at the tracks and things in a moment. And then there's marginal victories and draws, and that depends on victory points which you gain through capture or elimination of units and leaders. Now here you can see the encampment, and there are 7 encampment hexes, if you like, including the HQ. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. At the start of the game, they're controlled by the British, but at the end of the game, whoever controls 4 of the 7 of those, and the Americans can take control of those by entering the hex and then placing one of these counters on them. So whoever controls 4 out of the 7 at the end of the game get 3 VPs. But just below the encampment you can see this little arc of 7 red stars. If an American unit lands on or passes through one of these units, and they do that 4 out of the 7 times, can't be artillery units, but if they do that 4 out of the 7 times, the British player loses 1 step of morale. It's a one-off thing, so you have to somehow keep track of how many of these hexes the Americans have either entered or passed through. Back at the encampment we can see the tents. If an American unit enters one of them, not only do they control it, but they go a bit bonkers. Evidently the American troops were tired and hungry, and if they got into the British encampment, as I say, they went a bit bonkers and started looting. Now this is detrimental to the Americans, and they have to roll on a looting table which is in the exclusive rules. And if they fail that, that means they've succumbed to the food and wine and brandy that was in there, and bad things happen to them. They can't do very much at all. I think that's it. Let's have a look at the tracks, the game tracks. Here's the turn track, and this is where the Americans are setting up. You can see it says AM rain or reinforcements. The first 2 turns are for the Americans only. This is unusual because normally you roll, or the battle exclusive rule says Brits or Americans get the first go, and then after the first go you sort of roll for initiative. But the first 2 goes in this battle are American only. And depending on what happens in these 2 turns, and we'll see what happens, shows who has the initiative in the 3rd turn. Here's the morale track, and as you can see, the Americans start on 14 and the Brits on 13. And while you're here, it's high morale. Your initiative is +1, which will go through, and your morale, unit morale, is normal. So everything's tickety-boo here. Then if you move down into this area, you're fatigued. And the initiative, you don't get any bonus for your initiative throw, and your unit morale goes down, I don't know if you can see that, to -1. And then it gets worse. Here you're wavering. Initiative is -1 and unit morale is -2. And then you've lost. Here's where you store your here's where you'll store your captured and eliminated units. And that, I think, is about it. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll get the game set up. Okay, we're all set up. Over here you can see the British in their encampment, and down the road the foraging party, and over here the Americans set up on the turn track, ready to come in as reinforcements. Here are the tactic cards. Now, if you saw the unboxing, you would have seen these. Each side gets a set of these, and as you can see, it lists all the tactics that you can use, and depending on certain conditions, you pick one of those. Each side picks one of those secretly and then reveals it, and you look up the results of that on the little table that's printed on the cards there, as you can see, and apply that as a combat DRM. But I don't use these. Whoops. I use this, which I picked up from Board Game Geek, and it allows me to do the tactics randomly. And you know me, I do love me random. And on the back is the instructions. If you can see that, we'll go through that when we do a combat. Now, you can either do it just for the other side, or do it for both sides. I do it for both sides because I do like, as I say, the randomness. And what you do is you work your way down and see which table you're going to throw on. And that's the tactic for that side, and you repeat it for the other side. And then you look up the results on here and use that as your combat DRM. You don't have to use the cards or this little chart. Some people say it slows the game down, but I like it. Right, just a couple of other things to sort out before we start, one of which is our friend Swamp Fox. Now, I'm not sure if we can see that. Will that get in focus? Yes, there we are. Now at the top you see 2A or 3B. That means it can come in either turn 2 at point A or 3B. And with him is another unit, the South Carolina Militia Rifles, again 2A or 3B. Now they can come in on different points of entry, or, let's get that in focus again, there we go, or together. I like to bring them in together, but I like to randomise which entry point they're coming in on. So let me just show you first where those entry points are. Right, there you can see point A. This is on the left hand side of the map where all the American units come in on. And oh, I forgot to mention that the Americans do start with a momentum. Right, where's point B? Here's point B, right at the top of the map. And around here, you can see there's the swamp area, which, if you remember, only Swamp Fox can cross without hindrance. Well, a bit of hindrance, but no other units can enter those hexes. If my two units, Swamp Fox and the rifles, enter here, as I say, Swamp Fox can even cross the river without using the ferry, but the other unit has to use Nelson's ferry. So we'll see what happens when we get the dice thrown. Right, let's see where they're coming in. Okay, and I roll to 1 to 3. They're coming in turn 2 at point A, and a 4 to 6, turn 3, point B. Let's have a look. They're coming in on point B in turn 3. So I've put those on the turn track at turn 3, along with that rifle's, I don't know if you saw the first fire counter there. The other two are British regulars, and if we can get that in focus, can we? Yes, there we are. 19th and 30th foot, and you can see T-7C/D. Now that means they can come in either, well, it's turn 7, either at point C or point D. It's up to you. You can have them come in or not, because historically they didn't come in until the day after. But if you do decide to have them come in, they must come in on the same entry hex. You can't split them and have one on C and one on D. They've both got to be on C or D. The other thing is, if you do decide to bring them in, you, the Brits, will lose 1 step of army morale. So take that into consideration. But as always, I like to do it randomly. So let's see what we get. 1 to 3, they come in. 4 to 6, they don't. 6 again. So I have to check that die. So they're not coming in. Back in the box for them. At long last, we are ready for turn 1. Now, we'll be using this a heck of a lot. There we go. So, the first thing it says is the initiative segment. But, as I pointed out earlier, for the first 2 turns, the Americans go first and the British don't get a turn at all. So, after we do that, it says the movement phase. So we've put the turn counter on turn 1 with the American side face up, and it says place reinforcements. So here we go. Here's the first lot of reinforcements, and they are going on point A. We'll zoom in and have a little look what that stack's made up of. Here's what's in the stack. You can see there are 2 continental units and a couple of state troop units, infantry and horse. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned is the stacking limits. The stacking limit in this game is 6 SPs plus 1 artillery unit and as many leaders as you like. And you have to move your units one at a time because the stacking limit rule is very strict. For instance, you can't move stacks like you may do in other sort of war games. So if there was a stack here of, say, 6, and you moved your stack into it, as soon as you did that, you would be violating the stacking rules, and there are penalties for that. So you have to move them one at a time. Okay, let's get on with the movement. Right, the Americans are ready to move. Down the road, you can see there's the foraging party. Now, the only purpose of the foraging party is to decide who has the initiative in turn 3. If the foraging party are captured or killed, then the Americans will get the initiative in turn 3. If the foraging party happens to escape by withdrawing, they can warn the British that the Americans are coming, and they get the initiative. Oh, by the way, before I forget, there is a rule just for this battle, which says that the first time the Americans attack or indeed defend, they get what's known as a column shift on their attack. So when we do the attack, there's the close combat table, and there you can see the columns. If they're attacking, they will get a column shift to the right, so they get a better chance of success. And if they're defending, the column shift is to the left, so they get a better defense. So that only happens once, the first time they attack or defend. I'm telling you now because I'll probably forget. Right, movement. Here you can see the road. Now, on the terrain effects chart, movement along a road is 1 movement point, and this one, as you can see, has got 4. There is something else called strategic movement, which allows you to move double your movement value on a road, but on the first turn of the Americans this is not allowed. I think this is so you don't overrun the foraging party before turn 2. So here we go with the movement. We don't count the entrance hex, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And the cavalry or the horse or the dragoons, it's all the same thing in this game. Some things are labelled as dragoons, some as cavalry, but if they're sitting on an horse, then they're cavalry or dragoons or horse. So these can move 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not quite. And again 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 6. These Legion horse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's the movement phase over. The next phase is a rally phase, and this is where you try and rally disrupted or shattered units by using a die throw and their morale. Then it's defensive artillery fire phase. Now, normally, I think in most other games, the attacker's artillery fire first, but in this game it's the defender's artillery that fires. But of course, artillery only have a range of 3 hexes, and the British don't even know we're coming yet. So we don't do that. Then it's the rifle fire phase, but again, rifles have got to be adjacent to the target, and we have no rifles yet, and the British too far away. Close combat, no, we have to be adjacent for that. And that's it. Believe it or not, that is the end of the first turn. So, what I'll do, I think we'll leave it there. I've waffled on far too long, but I hope it's been informative and it's sort of piqued your interest in this game. Next turn things will start to happen, and the game proper, so to speak, will begin. So, I hope you've enjoyed this introduction, setup and turn 1 of GMT's tri-pack of Battles of the American Revolution. If you have, please consider subscribing and pushing the like button. It really does help the little channel grow. And push the bell if you wish. That will let you know when I do upload these videos. And leave a comment by all means. So, until the next time, this has been part 1 of a playthrough of Eutaw Springs. So until the next one, you take care and goodbye.